Hi, and welcome to today's Humpday Hangout. I'm Bobby Halton from Fire Engineering and Fire Rescue Magazines and Fire Apparatus and Emergency Equipment. Three fire publications under the Penwell umbrella. I'm joined today with three of my great friends. We've got Erich Roden, he's up in Milwaukee, he's editor-in-chief of Fire Rescue Magazine. We've got Anthony Kastros, who's out in St. Louis right now doing some training, but he's normally with Sacramento Fire Department, and but he's out there doing some training in St. Louis, and he's joining us. And then my good friend Anthony Avillo, who I said his name wrong again intentionally just to tick him off. So we're going to be talking today about general issues in the fire service, but we're going to be looking kind of with a unique perspective. Our two friends, Anthony and Anthony, are tight as two thieves, and they're going to be talking a little bit with you today about the difference between East Coast and West Coast tactics and some of the things that are surprisingly similar. So all things being equal, I think that's kind of a neat conversation. And then and we'll go other places from there. If you want to send us a message, if you send us a text to FE Talk or is it FE Talk or FE Chat, Brandon? What's the FE Talk, right? I think we had Brandon, so I guess Brandon muted. But if you just send us a message to FE Talk, we'll get your tweets and tweet us at FE Talk, and we'll put your question on the air. So if you have questions for Anthony and Anthony, or a question for Erich Roden about fire rescue or things he's doing in Milwaukee, we'd be happy to take them anytime. So guys, why don't you we'll go around the room real quick here, and I want you to tell everybody what you did on your summer vacation, what you're working on now, and the issues you're facing in your neck of the woods. So I guess we'll start with Jersey. How are you, Anthony? Anthony Avillo? I see your picture.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Finished the third edition of Fireground Strategy, submitted it in for publication, hopefully be published by the FDIC. I'm teaching as an adjunct professor at New Jersey City University, and I've been hired there as a consultant, so I'm working there. I'm also finishing up my master's degree, hopefully by May, working on my thesis, and continue with my on-duty work at North Hudson Regional Fire and Rescue, almost 30 years now.
What are you getting your master's in, Anthony?
National Security Studies.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I'm doing that. I can't teach full-time at a university without a master's degree, so right now I'm part-time as an adjunct, but once I get my master's, it will open up some other opportunities for me, and probably coincide that with retirement from Hudson.
Wow, will we have to call you professor then?
You got to call me that now.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Good for you. I think that there's a really important lesson in what you just said. If guys don't mind jumping on for a second here, I think that we do a great job in the fire service training people on how to do things, on skills, on what to do, but we don't do a whole lot about who we are. And I think having a philosophy of life requires ongoing education, reading, introspection, all that good stuff. And if you're not doing that, you're not growing as an individual. You know what I mean? You're not fulfilling your potential. So I think it's great when people pursue higher education and continue to pursue their education as a lifetime pursuit, not just something you do, graduate college or graduate high school and then get a job. I think that if you're really going to be a well-rounded officer, it's important, and it's really cool to hear that you're doing that. That's a great example to the folks that follow you, and there's a lot of folks that follow you, Anthony. I know I do.
Thanks, Bobby. Yeah, I think the education, there's the hands-on side of the coin and there's the education side of the coin. If you're lacking in one of them, you're not going to be as effective as you should be. You need to be well-rounded and versatile in both areas.
Yeah. It's interesting that a lot of folks strive to be an excellent firefighter, but I think it's probably better to strive to be an excellent human being who just happens to be a firefighter. You know what I mean? I think we'd be well served to keep that in our forefront. Well, let me bring in Anthony Kastros, who's out there in in St. Louis area and doing some training today. Anthony, how are you?
I'm blessed, my brother. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Excited to be here for the first time with my other brother Anthony and you and Eric and everybody. Um, I'm having a great time out here in St. Louis. It's a short trip. It's 2 days of training. Actually, jumping on a plane right after class tonight, going back to California to get back with the family. So, been very blessed though. Very good.
Outstanding. What are you working on now? Any new books coming out or?
Yeah, we've got two projects in the hopper with fire engineering. One long-term-ish, one short-term. We're looking at a new video on large-scale incident management, large-scale incident command. As you know, we have a lot of big fires and big incidents out in California, and we put together a team over the past 2 years of instructors who are very experienced in large-scale incident management. They've been on incident management teams. The two of them, believe it or not, are actually cops, incredibly skilled guys, experienced folks. And what we did is we built a curriculum that it takes our 2-day Calm the Chaos command training that's focused on structure fires. We blew it out to 4 days, and now we deal with all types of incidents, large-scale incidents, whether they be natural disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, or civil unrest, shootings like we're seeing a lot of right down the street here in Ferguson. We all know about what's going on there, and they talked a lot about that this week. And Also, large-scale fire management and incident response, because in California we're doing that a lot. And a lot of the members of my team have been on these Type 1 incident management teams for years. I was on one for 4 years. And we want to bring that down to the street level for the municipalities that are going to be having this, like Ferguson. They're going to have an incident that could go national overnight or within a matter of hours. And how do you do the incident action planning for that? So we have a curriculum out now that's been approved by the Department of Homeland Security. It's funded through the DHS and FEMA. It's in the national catalog now. And that means that municipalities all over the country, operational areas and counties, can use their federal grant money to pay for this class. So that's a big project right now. It's off the ground. We wrote our student and instructor manuals. We're partnering with Penwell Fire Engineering to do a video for that. And God willing, like my brother Anthony, I'm hoping to get that to out at FDIC 2015, hopefully. So we'll see.
Well, just before we bring in Eric here, I will point out that one of the East Coast versus West Coast differences that I've noticed in fires is that in New Jersey and where Anthony works, they try to confine the fire to the compartment or room of origin, whereas in California, you guys are kind of happy if you keep it in the same zip code.
Well, the nice thing is we got the Pacific Ocean on the left, so that's always a good barrier. None of our fires have reached Hawaii yet, so we're doing pretty good.
Yeah. That's outstanding. That's
yeah,
outstanding.
We've got a fire right now burning just in the Sierra foothills above Sacramento Metro Fire, where I work. That's cresting 90,000 acres right now in the Sierra foothills, and we've got a lot of guys on that fire right now. So.
Is that that's the King Fire? Correct?
Yeah, that's the King
You know
Fire.
what was fascinating about the King Fire, and you talk about, we'll get into a little more of this, but one of the things to take note of with the King Fire is that fire quadrupled overnight. It went from, I think, about 50,000 acres the first evening to exploded to over like 200 and some odd thousand acres in one day due to wind conditions and fuel conditions at the time. So the explosive nature of wildland firefighting, in particular with all the WUI issues that we have today, are absolutely amazing. And I had the great opportunity last week to sit down with a great friend of mine who's doing land use planning as part of his job with CAL FIRE. And he was really just an amazing guy. And when you think about how now we're involved in land use planning because of the whole WUI issue, that's pretty neat stuff. And it's not isolated to California or the Southwest at all. I mean, the WUI issue exists in Missouri and Maine and in Connecticut and New Jersey. It's everywhere. Folks build their homes in more rural settings. That's really what we're calling the WUI now. And those places can be, we saw it on Staten Island. We saw it on Long Island several years ago. They can have some catastrophic fires. Hey, without any further ado, I want to bring in the man of the hour, my partner in crime, one of the best firemen I've ever had the opportunity to work with, and clearly one of the people I hold very, very dear, Erich Roden. Hey, boss, how are you, man?
Great, great. How are you doing, sir?
Oh, living the dream.
Great, great. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in today. It's going to be a great show. We have uh, two very special guests with us today. I'm very looking forward to hearing what they have to say on some of the goings on in the fire service, particularly when we start talking about chiefs here in a minute. We have four chiefs on the talk today from all parts of the country, so I think we'll have a very good discussion and get a very good perspective across the spectrum. So I'm really looking forward to it. So again, thank you all for joining us today.
Great. Okay, Anthony and Anthony, what are some of the differences and what are some of the similarities in structural firefighting, east to west?
Well, let's start on the East Coast because that was here before the West Coast. So our country started there and our fire service origins are there. So it seems to make sense to me we start there.
All right. A little bit about the differences in command operations, I suppose. I think that the differences, I guess, we'll get to, but I think the similarities are, everybody is doing the job. Everybody's doing the same job. The concepts of company integrity, the concepts of discipline on the fire ground, the concept of a proper incident management system and training at all times. I think that doesn't change from East Coast to West Coast. And as a matter of fact, I don't think it changes really in the way that these things are actually conducted. I think some of the tactics, some of the philosophies are certainly different, but the main sort of business of fire and why we are who we are, I don't think that changes from East Coast to West Coast. I think there are some definite similarities and crossovers when you speak East Coast to West Coast in regard to those issues.
I would agree. That's the one thing that as you do FDIC year in and year out, and you have the tremendous joy and opportunity of meeting each other and getting to know each other, you find out, like we always say, we're more alike than different. But there are definitely nuances that are different. And I would say the biggest one that jumps out at me is the use of ICS. ICS has its roots on the West Coast, in California, through FireScope and through, like we mentioned earlier, the forest fires. Bobby, you'd mentioned, keeping it in the same zip code. We're really not going to be able to keep this fire in the same forest. It literally started in the El Dorado forest, and it's getting into the Tahoe National Forest. So the use of ICS in California is a very common phenomenon, and even though it's common, we still have a long ways to go to make it more effective on the day in and day out building structure fires. I think we could do a better job of that. So that would be the biggest thing I see.
As we talk about ICS and NIMS and how we're using it in a more widespread fashion, there was an interesting paper that was written by a police officer, a chief named, I believe it was Cynthia Renaud. Anyway, she was out of the California area, and it was for, I believe, the Naval Postgraduate. But anyway, she talked about what she called NIMS chaos, and she spoke to the initial arriving units and how, in her opinion, a very well written paper, by the way, I highly recommend people Google it, NIMS chaos, it's a great paper. She spoke about how there were some deficiencies in the NIMS system in regards to the initial few moments of an event, and she wasn't being critical or dismissive of how important it is to have a system like NIMS or NIMS in place. What she was pointing out was that, in her opinion, and I think we can all speak to this, is that when you have limited information, limited resources, and the time constraints that are placed upon us, which are kind of the conditions that we operate under, what Gary Klein and others would call the naturalistic decision-making setting or context. That the system isn't really set up yet to address that. Still have to establish certain parameters and certain conditions in order to get the system operational. Well, what are your thoughts on that? And how does that differ? How does the initial arriving phase, say, differ for how you operate in North Hudson, Anthony, versus how you operate in Milwaukee, Erich, or how you operate in Sacramento?
Well, in the initial arrival by us, it'll establish command. It's generally going to be an engine company, give the standard radio report. Normally, then a battalion chief takes command from him, and then if there is a fire, I will take command as the deputy. So we sort of have 3 layers of command transfer. Well, 2 layers of command transfer. Chief of the department shows up at a multiple, then it will be 3 layers. The thing that I see that sort of for us, I don't want to say eliminates, but reduces the potential for a lot of that early chaos is that we utilize standard initial scene assignments where the first arriving engine has a certain job, the second arriving engine a certain job, first ladder, that sort of thing. And that way, when the chief officer shows up, we know that the water supply has been taken care of, the initial water supply, the first line's already been stretched. I have someone doing search, someone getting to the roof, and people doing recon, based on where our standard operating procedures are. For me, that works really well because it allows me now to fill in the gaps that haven't been filled in and to think more along the lines of what I'm going to be doing with the additional companies coming in because, while we can put, 25 to 30 guys on a first alarm response at a fire with exposures, and where I work, we never have a fire without exposures, at least 2 or 3. Definitely not enough guys. So what will allow me to do is sort of, I know where everybody's operating in the beginning, and allows me now to start to plug into the areas that I'm going to need that haven't yet been covered. So, and again, you talk about the large fires going on out in the west, and we have the big brush fires and stuff, and of course we have in the areas where our brush fires are, you have rail in there, and probably all the bodies that were dumped by the mafia back in the 50s and the 60s, and hazmat and everything else in there. But we again just try and contain that, and we work within the incident command system. My incident command system is the way I run it is a little bit different. It's more of a street incident command system. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there. But yeah, our initial arrivers, they're doing the job they're supposed to do, giving the reports they're supposed to give, and being in the areas they're supposed to be. Makes it easier for me or my battalion chiefs to take over and just move that that operation and command organization forward.
Erich or Anthony, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll build upon what Anthony was talking about. We have a similar setup in Milwaukee where I work. We have seat assignments, positional assignments, areas of responsibility, and we have that handoff of command that Anthony was speaking to. It's a very good way to transfer command, and I guess a little backstory on the NIMS side of it. One of the benefits of NIMS is the fact that it's allowed us and essentially forced us to talk to our neighbors to find out what they were doing. And obviously it changed a lot of how we do business in Milwaukee with command. Like Anthony's department does, we assume command with the first driving company. They actually established that on radio rather than just calling in, working fire showing. They actually assume a command via the street address. And based on the order of arrival of successive companies, essentially that incident commander, whether it be the first driving engine, a truck, or a rescue, they essentially just ensure that it goes according to plan, which is based on how our books are written and what company is supposed to do based on the order of arrival. So it works very well for us. Again, it is street level incident command. Our new incident command policy is expandable. It does follow NIMS and it parallels it quite nicely. But it does afford us to rapidly expand the incident as well as incorporate outside, which is something my department's doing for the first time in its history. So we are seeing a lot of that seamless transition and incorporation of resources, whether it be internal or external. So, but it all starts with that first arriving company assuming command, establishing the strategy, and determining what method or mode of operation we're going to be operating under, and it essentially just falls into place from there.
As you're as you're both talking, I'm taking some notes here because I just find it fascinating, the little nuanced differences. Out in California, we're all on all three parts of the country, the left, the right, and the middle. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing, and I think that is to keep the NIOSH 5 from aligning. To have good risk assessment, to have good accountability, good communications, follow the SOGs, and have a good command structure. And in California, at least in my region in Sacramento, we use ICS. Typically on a house fire, we're going to do a lot of what you both just said. The first arriving engine company will either assume or pass command, however. That first captain does have the latitude to pass command to the second company. That doesn't mean he doesn't have command while he's on scene. He's retaining it, but he's announcing that the moment the second arriving officer gets there, he wants that officer to assume command from him. In the meantime, while he's on scene by himself, he'll be in what we call a working command mode. So let's say you're on a house fire with one engine. That captain is really stratifying, if you will, 3 levels. He's at the task level pulling the hose with his crew potentially. He's at the tactical level making tactical decisions on hose line placement and victim profiling. And he's also at the strategic level as the incident commander, calling additional resources or ordering the resources and directing. Once that second captain shows up, he can take the top 2 layers off his plate, the strategic level of command and almost even the tactical level to a point off his plate, certainly the strategic level, and say, okay, I'm focusing on my crew and the accountability of my crew. That second captain comes in, and he's going to be the incident commander for the interim period until the battalion chief arrives. That's typically in our system anywhere from 1 to 10 minutes. It just depends on how long that second battalion chief is going to be there. My jurisdiction is 417 square miles, and it's only covered by 5 battalion chiefs. So there's often times where that lag time for the first chief officer is quite a while. So we as everyone hopefully has, we have SOGs that we rely on for that first alarm. However, as you all know with your experience, rarely do fires go exactly by the numbers. So that's where the NIOSH 5 become an issue for us, and the issues of communications and accountability could get sideways. So while we have the SOGs, we rely on ICS for the larger incidents. So if that house fire involves a large home, we set up command with the first battalion chief. Once he's established command, he may have all resources reporting to him directly. But as soon as that second battalion chief arrives, because we do get 2 BCs on a working structure, that second battalion chief is typically going to fill that tactical position and take a division for him. That may be Division A, it may be Interior Division, probably Division A is the term we're going to use. And I think about the last house fire I had, my companies were filling in, going to the roof for ventilation, going inside for search and fire attack. As soon as that second BC arrived, I did a quick face-to-face with him, made him Division A, and he did a lap, and he was accountable for all the crews inside the building, inside the house, which is nice because now that reduces radio traffic. They're talking face-to-face with him. He's going in and out as needed to communicate with them. He's doing an ongoing risk assessment, things that I can't do from the command post, and things that the crews engaged in the firefight aren't seeing, he's able to see. And so that's just a brief overview of kind of our system. If we go bigger, second alarm or commercial fire apartments, then we're going to set up divisions with multiple TAC channels pretty early.
Hey, Brandon, did we lose Bobby? We might have lost Bobby here. I don't see him on. You guys see Bobby on chat?
No, I don't. I don't see your face either.
Yeah, Eric, it looks like Bobby's dropped off. If you'll take over from now, moderating, I'll run over to Bobby's office and make sure he's back up online.
Okay. All right, folks. It looks like we temporarily lost Bobby, but I'll jump in here for a moment and a question for Anthony, and that is, let's talk about the first arriving chief officer. I guess in one of the polarizing topics, especially in my region, is the position of that first arriving battalion chief or chief officer, district chief. I'm just using my nomenclature for that position, but that first command chief, if we'll call it. Where should that person or that individual be positioned? Should they be in a mobile position, or should they be in a fixed location, i.e., the chief's buggy, an incident command post parked off-site, if you will, away from the incident? Let's jump on that real quick and get in that. That's one of the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about with regards to street level incident command. So we'll start with you, Anthony, in Jersey. What are your thoughts?
Okay, good, Anthony, in Jersey. This was one of the things that California and I were talking about. That's I guess a major difference. We have a fixed command post, which would generally be in front of the building. But as Anthony said, I get 2 battalions responding with the work and fire, plus myself as the deputy. So that gives me a lot of flexibility. Our policy is that they have to show up in full gear. All our chief officers show up in full gear. Any mutual aid we get brings chiefs. They're in full gear, and I utilize those chiefs. When I would get on the scene, I would take that first chief, and I would usually move him to the interior division. My next chief would probably get the next exposure, whatever is most threatened. But I'm a big fan of being in front of the fire building, and 2 reasons. Number one is if I were to park my car, and from inside my car, I might be 3 or 4 blocks away. It's just the way the streets run in North Hudson. To the fire building. And the other end of it is, and I have run notifications system sometimes is really bad. And so I have to go to the mobile, and sometimes I'll do it from the car, but lately, actually, I've been doing it from the mobile at the ladder company in front of the building. I like to see the building. I like to see what's going on. And the reason I look at that is I have some great battalion chiefs, great captains, people that I trust, some of the best in the business. But my job as the deputy, as the senior guy, the platoon commander, I have the most experienced eyes. So I'm a big fan of let's get as much experience looking at this thing. And I like them to be, like say, I'm the most experienced, I guess, of all of them. For me to be down the block sort of takes away from some of the potential things that maybe they could miss, or, I just kind of feel that the more eyes looking at this thing, especially the more experienced eyes, makes the incident either that much safer, maybe that much more efficient. What might be, I'd rather have my battalion chiefs giving me what they see from the inside while I'm in front of the building looking at what I see from the outside, rather than hearing it from down a block. It's just the culture that I'm in. It's the way I was brought up. But I kind of see the advantages of that, only being that, most experienced guy is the guy looking at the fire building, not the guy getting the reports from 3 blocks away that, can you trust the reports? Yeah, I guess you can, but, there's that little bit of area of discomfort that I would rather be the eyes on the fire building because, I'm, in the lack of a better term, I'm the most seasoned of all of them, and I think that's important.
Does that mean, Anthony, I apologize, my camera went dead for a minute there, but does that mean that you're, in effect, out of the buggy and you're mobile at that point?
Yeah, I'm out in front of the building with my command technician. We're in a strategic position where we hopefully can see a couple of sides of the building, but we're also in a position that anybody coming into the command post, which is, they have to report to the command post. Unless you're one of the first companies on scene with specific assignments, everybody else comes to the command post for assignment or staging or whatever it happens to be. So we have a fixed position, generally on the alpha side of the building, but that will also be announced once we are setting up our command operation, and we're going to be working for a while. We'll tell them where the command post is, and yeah, it is fixed. It's outside of the car.
Well, and remember, if you want to send in questions to Anthony, or to Eric, or myself, you can do them to FE Talk and just hashtag FE Talk. Bill Carey of Firefighter Nation the web editor of Firefighter Nation, sent in this question. He said, staffing is always a problem, and this dovetails on what Anthony just said, but explain the advantages and use of aids. And then also, if you guys all wouldn't mind commenting on how we could incorporate the use of fireground aids or chief's aids into the volunteer fire departments. Because Anthony, you just spoke about how you use your aid. I thought that was very well said.
Well, not to monopolize, I'll speak real quickly here. I have a ComTech, which is my aide. He's a firefighter. He runs the command board. We sort of have a telepathy where he knows what I'm thinking, I know what he's thinking. He runs a lot of the operation for me, and it makes it, sort of takes a little bit off my plate, makes it much easier for me to run that operation. To be honest with you, I don't know what I did before I had this guy. I think what I did was I usually took a marker and drew my command organization on the side of a rig or on the hood of a car, and a few times I did not have a dry erase marker. But if you're going to do that, utilize a dry erase marker. One of the things that I try and push in a volunteer organization is, and the aide is also the accountability officer. What I try and push is, these volunteer organizations, they have these guys that have been around like a million years. They're the most senior guys. They don't go into the fires anymore. Listen, they come into the fire ground anyway. Use those guys as your accountability / aid, because you're in a volunteer department and you've been elected, but maybe you don't have that many fires under your belt. You got this guy next to you that might have been on the department for 40 or 50 years, that he's going to be there anyway. Utilize his expertise, utilize his ability to sort of give you some information. It's sort of like a mentor, sort of, at the command post if you utilize this. But too many departments take these guys and push them out to the other corners that will operate as a fire police and other sort of menial tasks, when if you really look at it, the most experienced guy that may never go back in the fire building anymore, maybe the guy you want is your command tech.
Wow, great idea. Great idea. I'm one of those older volunteer guys who are hanging out there, so I would love to be somebody's aide at a fire.
Yeah, it's valuable on a fire ground.
Yeah. Eric, Anthony, any thoughts there?
Well, in California, an aide is not as common. Like in my county, none of the fire departments have an aide. I don't have a driver or an aide. So because of that, I rely on ICS a little more to be my accountability. So my division group, centralizing the accountability to them for their groups and divisions, and that works really well. So they become my aides, if you will, but they're out in the incident. As far as command post location, totally agree. I try and park on the front A side or corner of the A side. I stay in the buggy personally. I like to have the quiet of that environment. I can then hear both the tactical and command channels very clearly. I can talk to dispatch and the companies or division supervisors clearly. I can hear multiple channels. I can look at my mobile data terminal and get updates, and it's very quiet and controlled. But again, like Anthony, I like to be where I can see what's going on. One of the derivatives of me being in the cab not only is the environment, but unlike Anthony, I've got, from the East Coast, I've got nice wide streets. I'm out in California, and our streets are really wide. Got lots of real estate I can park. There's lots of parking lots. I'm not looking at these really narrow streets that he has and the high rises that he has. And so my environment's more conducive to staying in the vehicle for that reason, but I also like the calm. And then when people come up to the command post, I don't want everybody in their opinion up at the command post. I don't want every politician and bystander and all the background noise of the command post. I want it to be very quiet. And I've actually heard the nuanced differences in the tone and pitch of a captain to help me drive what's going on more than what they're saying in some cases. I can hear pass devices in the background. I mean, there's a lot of things you can hear from the quiet of the cab and control that environment. As far as aides go, when I have staff officers show up, which invariably do, maybe a light duty officer, maybe an EMS officer or a staff chief, I'll put the battalion chiefs in the field, division and group level, and I'll put the staff chiefs in the command post with me, so I'll have them sit in the passenger seat and fulfill that role. Or they'll stand next to my window and I'll roll my window up, but when I need to talk to him, I'll roll it down. Meanwhile, he can do what he needs to do face to face on my behalf with everybody walking up to him. I just crack my window, tell him what I need, and he takes care of it. But again, our units, our BC buggies are set up where you can pull up, open up the rear, and have that command board system like Anthony's talking about from the East Coast. And we can do that, but again, and a lot of our chiefs do that. Personally, I don't, because again, I don't like to invite the background noise and the chaos that comes. I think the command post needs to be a very quiet and controlled environment. So.
Actually, it's probably better that I'm going third here, because we run a hybrid incident command position, if you will, from what we've just been talking about, I should say. Our first driving chief officer is always mobile. It remains at operations and command position until the arrival of a second battalion chief. Like Anthony in Jersey, we get 2 battalion chiefs dispatch on a full assignment or first alarm assignment every time. 35 people, 3 engines, 3 trucks. Again, the 2 chiefs, a paramedic unit, a safety officer, and a rescue all coming in. So essentially, having that chief, that first driving chief remain mobile allows us to kind of choreograph those 35 people coming in, all wanting to do something at the same time. So, again, that chief, although he or she is mobile, does, maintain a somewhat of a fixed position on the A side of the building, is available to have face-to-face conversations with incoming companies. Our second driving chief, moreover, has 2 options. The first driving chief officer retains that command and operations functions. Usually designates the second driving chief as the incident commander. Now, that incident commander usually will take a position inside the first driving battalion chief's buggy, which again, we have narrow streets like they have in North Jersey, but we usually get a chief's buggy close enough to the fire building where we can maintain a nice safe position, kind of out of the mix, not having the spiritual advisors, as we call them, coming up and grabbing your ear to offer suggestions and beg for assignments. So, I agree with both Anthony's here that having a chief with eyes on the fire building, the chief that's there the longest remaining in that mobile position to keep his or her eyes on the building, having that second driving chief in a more off area, a quieter area to talk to the dispatcher and manage resources on a grander scale. Now, when we talk about chief's aides, we lost our chief's aides years ago, much like Chicago and other Rust Belt towns like mine. But it's a position I hope we get back in the fire service. I'm very envious when I hear chiefs talk about having their aide and how great those positions are. Although it's nice having 2 battalion chiefs arrive on my department in anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes, it's still nice having somebody to man the radio, man the command board, assist with accountability, start Angelo on the command board, and placing companies while the chief can have his or her eyes on the building. I think that's a plus. It's one of the things I've always championed, and it's something I hope we get back because it is an invaluable position. So how do we? What's a contingency for that? Well, on my department, we have resources, and it's a benefit where we can manage adequate resources. We're very blessed where I work to have as many people as we have available. We always call for extra companies. We call for extra alarms. There's nothing wrong with designating a company to operate as a chief's aide or to designate 1 or 2 individuals to fulfill that role. It may not be the sexiest job on the fire ground, but they're still doing something. They'll still be sitting and staging for a while. So definitely something to consider for those people that may need to rely on that aid function.
And I'll throw in what we're kind of messing with Albuquerque and Coppell. We were kind of taking a little bit different tact, kind of a 4th position, if you will, in this discussion. That's why I think tactics are so fascinating, because a lot of what we do is so parochial, it's so local. In other words, it's dictated by the needs and the resources of the community. In Albuquerque and in Coppell, we had 4 battalion chiefs on duty at any point in time in Albuquerque, and we used to send all 4 of them to every working fire because we equipped them with these radio things that they could just go back to district, by radio if needed for another event, which we found didn't happen a whole lot, but did happen occasionally. One of the things we started looking at towards the end of my tenure there was, rather than having the first due officer assume command, we were having them do a tactical assessment. In other words, size up the event and then go to work, much like Anthony's crews, based upon their arrival order and the type of resource they were. So if they were a truck company, they would size it up and go to work on ventilation functions or providing access and or laddering the building or whatever other activity that they were suited for, or if they're an engine stretching line and getting ready to do initial attack. So our point there was to try to keep the company officer connected with his crew, but at the same time paint a picture for the subsequent arriving units of what they had. Command was always, our thoughts were to try to keep command with the command level officers, because that's what they did, and they were supported in that regard. And also, we kind of looked at the works of Klein, and we looked at the works of Decker and Maldonado and others who talk about, how limited our ability to make decisions and to forecast into the future are, just based upon the human condition and how the mind works. It's you can recite a lot of mnemonics and such, but to really apprise a situation and forecast where a fire would be is very difficult if you're also worried about spotting your rig, hose line selection, taking care of your rookie, air supply, access, flow paths, et cetera, et cetera. So we kind of looked at, keeping command with command level officers, and then having our officers focused on their area of expertise and their crew and their resource. So kind of a different take on it. We did not have aides at that point in time, although much like Erich was talking about in Milwaukee, we did have we had seen safety officers and EMS supervisors who would drop into either safety officer roles or would work as aides at the fire until the arrival of the subsequent chief officers, who would then jump in and help work as a command team on the fire or take divisions or groups within the fire. So kind of an interesting hybrid, but again, everything's local. We got an interesting question that came to us via Twitter off of FE Talk, and the question was regarding a Mayday. Do you maintain operations and the firefighter rescue on the same frequency, or do you separate them? Real quickly, we always took operations to a different frequency, left the rescue on the initial frequency so that the firefighter in trouble didn't have to change his frequency, but we kept somebody talking to him the whole time. I don't know, the rest of you, how do you handle frequencies and Maydays?
Well, I can speak to the last one I had. It was in a residence, and the critical piece of that was to assess and do a lunar report, like we all know. That's pretty standard in the industry, and find out what's going on. And in that particular case, it was a rapid rescue by an adjacent unit, adjacent crew. The RIC company did not need to be deployed. So in that case, we just kept everything on the same channel. However, had we had a prolonged event, it would be just like you said, Bobby. We would have kept the member or company down on this original channel and moved the RIC operation, or moved the fireground operations, I should say, to a different channel.
We utilize the double channels as well. Luckily for us, knock on wood, haven't had too many Maydays. But there's some things we played around with. I would generally stay in command of the fire because I'm in command of the fire, and I would put one of my battalions in charge of the Mayday operation. That would stay on the fire channel and the regular channel, and then the operations would switch to another channel. We've toyed around with a couple other things. We toyed around with utilizing an additional channel for the RIC team and using a chief calling it a Mayday manager. And the one thing we found that it is a bit unwieldy in the sort of training environment. It was very good, but it was a bit unwieldy. And what was happening was the RIC team, rather than listening to the distressed firefighter screaming all over the radio, they found that if they were utilizing communications coming from the command post to guide them a little bit, they found it was a much less stressed operation. The other thing we found was you can do a feedback-assisted rescue a lot easier because If the RIC team is operating on the same channel as the guy that's down, utilizing a feedback-assisted rescue, it comes out over the RIC team radios, and it doesn't have the effect it should. And then the third option I just finished reading from somewhere is don't change channels at all. Tell everybody to shut their pie holes and get on with the operation. You know, if we can be disciplined enough, we don't have to go through this sort of organizational sort of nightmare of trying to switch everybody over, who heard it, who didn't hear it, and just if you keep everybody on the same channel and keep people disciplined, maybe that is the answer right there. You know, keeping it simple.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick here. My department, again, we looked at two options. Switching everybody involved with the rapid intervention effort onto a different frequency initially, and what that did was essentially confusion, mainly in its incorporation and some of the questions that came as a result. So what we decided to do was keep everybody on the initial frequency. Again, a good exercise, at a fire is, or on training grounds, try to get 35 people to change radio channels simultaneously. It's very difficult. It's almost impossible. However, companies on the initial frequency. My department, like several other comparable places, use different response level anytime we have a major incident. We have a RIT truck. It's our third routing truck. Stands by in front of the fire building as a RIT team. They'll be on the initial frequency. But we have what we call a RIT 1 through RIT 5 alarms, where you get a whole slew of people. I think New York calls it a 1060, where it gets essentially 3/4 of the department that comes in. We have something similar. It gets a tremendous amount of resources. As you can imagine, keeping those individuals are problematic. Again, as these companies arrive, they all want to do something, say something, announce their arrival, let everyone know they're there and where they want them, and they could be stepping all over each other. So what we've done is we've placed them on a separate frequency, and it's worked out very well. And essentially, they're talking to each other on a separate frequency, and it allows the command chief. Again, we have multiple chiefs that respond to a fire. It allows that chief to communicate with a whole, essentially half of the incident, as well as managing the initial incident. So I do believe in separating the frequencies and kind of dividing and conquering the problems, if you will, the initial fire and the rescue.
Well, I know that our good friend Anthony Kastros is up against a hard break. He has to get back into the classroom where he's teaching on leadership today, which is kind of funny. I'm just kidding, Anthony. I'm just giving you a hard time. I'd love to.
I just teach it. I didn't say I know it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I gave my first leadership class at gunpoint a few months ago at the Fools International Conference. A friend of mine had to cancel, so they asked me if I could step in and do a leadership class, and I wrote the class on what do you call it? The little notepad notes they give you. And I was supposed to initially, they asked me to do an hour 45, but then Jason Hovelman, who was going to follow me, and Mike Dugan jumped in to give me a hand. He had to cancel also, so we ended up going 4 hours, and we were worried if we could fill the time. And then at the 4-hour break, we were only about a third of the way through my notes that I'd written on this, little notepad thing. So I think since the dawn of man, we've been fascinated by leadership and its implications. It's kind of neat. In terms of leadership, and I'm just going to throw this out as kind of the final question before we lose Anthony. Is there a difference in how you would lead opinions and how you would lead on the East Coast? Do you see the fire service that as being that radically different, that there'd be differences in your leadership styles?
I'm going to paraphrase your question back, Bobby, because you were broken. So you're asking, is there a difference between the East Coast, West Coast leadership style? Was that your question?
Yeah, I just think and having lived on the East Coast and and now having family on the West Coast, they're kind of different.
They're definitely different. I will tell you this this is my humble opinion, having a lot of good friends on the East Coast like Anthony and yourself. The East Coast, well, the beauty of the East Coast style is it's up close in your face and not politically correct. It's just about getting to the point and moving on. On the West Coast, a leader is challenged with all kinds of litigation and regulations and political pressures, and sometimes how you look at someone, the tone in which you speak to them can land you in a harassment. I've been blessed to be a battalion chief for 9 short years, and I've been investigated 4 times. And all of those times surrounded the issue of somebody feeling offended on me just trying to do my job. And I'm happy to say all 4 times I got off without any discipline because I was just doing my job. But I think out here on the West Coast, and I mean no offense to my West Coast brethren, but it's a much more kinder, gentler, politically regulated, and accountable kind of world. And I mean, there's a time and a place for that, but there's also a time and a place to just get the job done, to strap on your pants and just get the darn job done and get over yourself. And so that's a challenge a lot of the time. And I was raised, as you know, by an old salty Greek dad with one of 8 kids who grew up in the Depression. He was a World War II Army Ranger, and I grew up to share my opinion, to be direct, and that doesn't go over very well. And so I've had to learn other skills that go against my nature. I think I should have been born in the 50s in New York instead of in California sometimes.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by
way. Don't be so defensive, for God's sake.
Forget about it.
No. It's funny because your perspective of the East Coast is very stereotyped, and rightfully so. But to be honest with you, we're going through the same stuff you guys are going through now. You know, sensitivity training, and watch how you talk to people, watch what you say. Especially, the higher up you are, the more you're sort of held to a standard that maybe the ones beneath you are not held to. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But the way this politically correct world is influencing the fire service in so many different ways. And even as a professor at a university, it's you have to be careful how you speak to people. You have to be careful how you carry yourself. You're always accountable for what you say and what you do. Probably more so than you've ever been. So I think the leadership, I think the people that are sort of not addressing the things that are mandated in the 21st century, existence, wind up eventually getting themselves in trouble. And I've seen people, I know people, and you know what? It's never ever worth it. You're better off operating in a more politically correct manner, but that happens sometimes when you're on the fire ground. There's the non-fire ground and the fire ground, and when you're on the fire ground, sometimes the politically correct stuff really kind of has no place. That sensitivity sort of gets put on the side a little bit when you're on the fire ground. While
that's happening, you've got 15 or 20 bystanders videotaping, with their phones.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing the, amateur video and putting it on YouTube while your guys are sharing their opinion of themselves. It's pretty interesting. Bobby, I hate to say this, but I gotta go, fellas. I got 50 guys out there staring at me, so I gotta get back out. But I just want to say 2 things real quick. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This is great. Erich, great job on the keynote at FDIC this year, brother. I didn't really get a chance to talk to you today, but thank you for a great job you did. And I also want to thank not only Bobby and Anthony and Erich, but also want to thank Dave Dabowski out here in the Mighty River Pools. They've been great out here. They're helping sponsor this training, as well as Jason Holman, who you mentioned, Bobby, who's just a tremendous guy out here in the St. Louis area, out of Florissant Fire Department. So
yeah, and quick plug. Jason's going to be doing a hands-on class, a brand new hands-on class at FDIC this year on bailouts. So kudos to Jason. Wrote a great proposal. It's very tough to break into the hands-on portion because we have very limited space. but Jason's going to be doing a bailout class for us. So look for that. I know it's going to be a great class. He's got a great group of guys and gals he threw together to do it. And the one thing I will say, and I think that what came across, the word politically correct has just been vilified, and rightfully so. I think the whole political correctness thing has been overblown in a lot of ways. But what will always save you, and what will always make a difference, is what my sainted mom once said of my good friend Jerry Tracy. She said, Jerry embodies everything in a true New York gentleman. And she grew up in New York City her whole life, born and raised there. But what that meant was that gentlemanliness and gentlewomanliness has never gone out of style. Being sensitive and being polite and being mannered has never gone out of style. Political correctness is a whole other thing. People believe they have a right not to. You can have an opinion, state it in a gentlemanly or a gentlewomanly way. And if someone takes offense to it, they can react, and you can say, you can clearly let meant it was just how you felt. On the fire ground, behaving as a gentleman or a gentlewoman goes to command, and there's a tremendous difference between command and leadership. Leadership is not the fire ground. The fire ground is about tactics and command, and that's a whole other discussion we could have someday, the difference between leadership and command. We don't do a very good job of teaching command in the fire service, and we probably should see more classes on command and the whole art and science of command, and perhaps fewer on leadership. But that's a story for another day. But thank you, Anthony, for joining with us, and
Thank you, brother.
And I'll let Erich Roden chime in on that before we close out.
Yeah, I guess I finish off with a couple of things. I won't go on a diatribe or anything here, but I guess nowadays people are getting jammed up a lot more for what they're saying versus what they're actually doing. And look, if you're cognizant about everything that leaves your mouth, think critically before you speak. You'll keep yourself out of a jam. I had an incident yesterday at work. A respective rank issue, and it cost somebody the remainder of the tour off and some other days. And unfortunately, these are good people, and unfortunately, specific words come out of the mouths to people that hold rank, and it usually doesn't go well for the subordinates. So as long as people keep their head into what they're there to do, and obviously everyone has an opinion. If you know your opinion isn't the opinion of the group, then you might want to keep it to yourself. Conversely, often in the firehouse environment, a lot of us with the group mentality, they all tend to lose their mind and assume one, which definitely gets some people in jam as well. As the issues get polarizing, and there's some tough kitchen tables out there. In my job, there's some very, very tough places to enjoy a meal or a cup of coffee, the men and women, and especially as an officer, everything that leaves your mouth is going to be digested, repeated, and so you really just need to kind of keep your lips sealed when you have to. Prefer working in the paramilitary organization. Rank specific and authoritative in that hierarchical sense, but what it does is it kind of streamlines everything, keeps everybody on the level, and again, when you have those lapses of judgment, they're more easy to spot and mitigate as they come up. So, but I guess my final point on the whole leadership thing is, if we tend to focus a little more on management these days, I think the leadership stuff will align in terms of managing ourselves, our companies, our operations. Everything we're doing, if you're a well-managed individual, well-managed company, and well-managing company officer, you'll keep yourself and people out of trouble. So they'll tend to fire them. So just my 2 cents on the whole thing.
That's good stuff. Anthony, any closing thoughts before we wrap this up today?
Yeah, I just like to thank you, Bobby, and Fire Engineering, and Erich, and good luck with the magazine, Erich. You're doing a great job. Brandon, thank you for everything. But somebody said something to me, and if you can justify what you do and what you say and how you act to your mother, you're probably doing the right thing. So
Exactly
like
my
to thank
point.
everybody who be safe out there.
That's some good stuff. That you're exactly right. And if you're acting as a gentleman or a gentlewoman, you can have a discussion with someone. It's interesting, and Erich said it. It's probably best not to try to argue or discuss things with folks who aren't willing to see things from another perspective. You know, one of the things you have to do when you're having a discussion about someone is reiterate their position so they understand where they're coming from and appreciate it. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but you can understand it and appreciate it, and then perhaps present your side. And unless the people are willing to do that, one-sided arguments are just, as Erich pointed out so eloquently, are just an environment ripe for just emotional disagreement and bad feelings. But occasionally you'll get a group that's interested in learning and growing and trying to learn from others' opinions, and it can be completely different, which is kind of the whole spirit of the Hangouts. Hey, next week I probably won't be here, so Erich Roden will be hosting without me. It'll be the boss himself. He'll have, I know that John Walters, FDNY firefighter from Sons of the Flag, is scheduled to be on with probably Ryan Parrott, who is a former Navy SEAL. So they'll be with Erich. I don't know what other guests Erich may invite. I'll leave that up to Erich. But I'll let Erich close us out today, as he's going to be your host next week. I'm Bobby Halton. I'd like to thank Anthony Avillo and my good friend Anthony Kastros for being with us today. They're two of the finest guys I know. Anthony's is an advisory board member and has been a great friend. Both are teaching this year, so please join with them at FD. Guys, please support us on Firefighter Nation, Fire Rescue, Fire Engineering, and Fire Apparatus magazines. We love to hear your opinions about how we're doing and how it's going. If you're a writer or a speaker, remember FDIC is looking for you, so are the magazines. We'd love to have your opinion out there. Erich, why don't you take us out, and thank you for having us on here today.
I'd like to thank you all for watching today, especially our guests, our two Anthony's and Bobby. You know, these are great hangouts. You know, we want you all to become a part of them. Feel free to start thinking of questions for next week. We're going to have some tremendous guests on, some interesting stuff we'll be talking about. But again, thank you all for watching in today, and to our guests, and we will see you next week.